Hello, I'm Charles Kaplan, and I'm president of South Texas Commercial Association of Realtors, STCAR. We're an overlay board for 44 counties in South Texas, and we're a leader in commercial real estate representation. Today, we have 4 experts lined up to speak about the Texas economy and how you can participate in shaping the next decade of commercial real estate. First, we're going to have Tom Long. He's Chief Development Officer for the San Antonio Economic Development Foundation, with a brief showcase of what San Antonio has to offer.
Hello. We're the lead economic development organization in the South Central Texas area, dedicated to growing quality jobs in the San Antonio region. Thank you for allowing us the time on your conference agenda. Many of you may know San Antonio for the Alamo, the Riverwalk, or as a great place to come up and go shopping. But Greater San Antonio is so much more. I can give you all the pitch points, like that we're one of the fastest growing economies in the United States, that our military heritage, cybersecurity dominance, and thriving tech, manufacturing, and bioscience sectors position us for future job growth. And all of this is against a backdrop of art, education, recreation, and culture, creating a one-of-a-kind experience to grow a business and love life. But I have here today a video that can do a much better job of showing you what I mean. Even during this time, our San Antonio industry, education, and government leaders came together to share what it's like living, working, and thriving in San Antonio. Again, thank you for including us on your agenda today. I hope that following the conference, we may be able to welcome each of you in person, perhaps, to provide you a better introduction to San Antonio as a place for your clients to grow their business. Enjoy the virtual conference. If I can ever be of help, don't hesitate to call.
Texas is such a proud, family-oriented, and business-friendly state.
We love it here. We know you will too.
Hidden gem, last secret, pick your cliche. It's actually true here.
We're better than any other city in standing up for business.
You might think it's a temporary relocation and end up staying a while.
Of course, we love it when people move here, but we like to grow our own too. Everyone deserves an opportunity for an excellent education. That's why we work with industry partners to make sure our graduates are ready for work.
We're part of a $1 billion R&D ecosystem, including cyber, data science, advanced manufacturing, and precision therapeutics for chronic diseases. Every year, we turn out more than 650 certified cyber experts from the top program in the country, alongside 30,000 other degreed professionals from all of our higher education institutions here in Greater San Antonio.
Commercialization of military assets is key. San Antonio is the only place in America with DoD assets across medical, cyber, and tech fields. It's 300 years of military culture that makes it possible.
We live the good life for less. I'm in the premier high-rise downtown by day and in the Texas Hill Country at night. We don't sacrifice. Class A space is prime for the taking here. San Antonio is an unpainted canvas. Make it your masterpiece.
We have our visionaries like everyone else, but for the most part, we are an untapped market with huge potential.
Water? No, the future is not the issue. With the nation's largest desalination plant and the most diversified water portfolio, we have what a lot of metros wish they had.
We have municipally owned water and power companies that think globally and act locally. In fact, we are currently designing a new energy storage RFP that is going to help change the global landscape for new energy solutions, including energy storage.
We surveyed thousands of business people, and the #1 thing that people say about San Antonio is how welcoming and compelling our diverse, inclusive culture is. There are many incredible purpose-driven companies here who operate great businesses while doing so much to help our communities thrive. San Antonio is the perfect place for tech, manufacturing, and headquarter operations.
We are proud that demographically we represent America's future.
Look, we don't compromise the good life. San Antonio has every single thing you'd expect from a big city, but our people can afford to build a legacy here.
San Antonio has been around 300 years. We plan to be here 3,000 more. Come and be a part of it. We'll build the city together.
Next, I'm interviewing Leslie Allen Glick. He's co-chair in his law firm's International Trade and Customs Specialty Group. He's a national expert. He's an author about the USMCA and an attorney who represents import and export companies throughout the South Texas and North America.
Mr. Glick, good day, and we welcome you and say thank you for joining us. Tell me a little bit about your role as a co-chair in international trade and customs and in creating and helping implement the USMCA.
Okay, well, thank you, Charles. Well, I'm co-chair of my firm's practice group. I don't want to take credit for being one of the negotiators of NAFTA. I was part of what they consider the private sector group that very often is briefed. They can consider you to be asset holders of people, stakeholders that have an interest. So I was involved in most of the briefings for USMCA, both from the government and the Congress. And going back to NAFTA, I have to admit that I'm old enough to remember NAFTA and actually was involved in that too. As you know, I wrote a book on NAFTA. Now I'm updating it into a book on USMCA, coming out with Kluwer Law International in November. So I've seen a lot about this, but I have to say first to start off that I have a good affinity with South Texas. From my very first job, even before NAFTA, we had what you now consider still around the maquiladoras. And I was traveling down to Laredo and Eagle Pass and many of those cities on the border. Usually I would fly into San Antonio and rent a car. So I know the area where most of you are, and it's one of my favorite parts of the country. Spent a lot of time there. When we're talking about NAFTA and how it's changed South Texas, I remember my first trip to Laredo. You probably remember this. They still had dirt roads. And now you go out there and the Mines Road and big industrial parks and warehouses. So you can't deny that NAFTA has had a good effect on that part of the country, bringing in lots of commerce and trucks and railroad. So I'm a big advocate of NAFTA. I think it was very successful. You hear a lot of critics say NAFTA do this, NAFTA do that. But when you look at the statistics, it's been beneficial to all three countries. So now in my role as an attorney, I help people with a lot of the legal aspects. For example, both the NAFTA and USMCA, in order to qualify for the benefits, you have to meet the rules of origin. And there's certain rules you have to follow as to regional value and local content. And a lot of times these aren't so simple. And Customs does validations where they go and check on people's records. So it's been a lot of work, but I'm glad to see that USMCA was signed on July 1st, or not signed, but implemented on July 1st. And after many years of negotiation and some rough spots, everybody seems to be moving along. And I think the benefits will be substantial.
Well, thank you for that insight. Over the last couple of months, from the real estate side in North America, the major organizations, the Canadian realtors, the Mexican realtors, and then, of course, the National Association of Realtors in the United States have issued joint press statements and so on applauding this first stage of the USMCA. And part of that is because from the realtor or association side, the general insight that they have is that this will be good for the economy. It'll be good for communities. It'll be good for sustainable economic development. And that's good for real estate because that results in the building and continued building of the Texas lifestyle economy and our children's future. So thank you for your role in helping to make some of that happen. What advice, given that perspective, can you give to the people in the audience here, particularly in the commercial real estate, about how you, from your vantage point, can help or see deals that need to be done actually come together, which is one trick, yet funded, convincing somebody with money, and enduring any of the feasibility stages and result in a close and ultimately some commission. Any thought about, how under these new rules or your understanding of them or where it's going, that it, in terms of transactions, does the USMCA help us or not?
Okay, well, that's a good question. There's one part of the USMCA that everybody agrees was a great improvement. Many people call it, USMCA, the modernized NAFTA, because when NAFTA took effect, there was no internet. So there's a special chapter now on digital trade. And particularly now in this COVID era, this digital trade recognizes and legitimizes the cross-border use of the internet, electronic signatures, electronic authentications, many of the things that's necessary to do business now. And this is all now incorporated into the USMCA. They've also made it clear that neither country or none of the three countries can impose a digital tax. This is very popular in Europe now. They're trying to tax the internet providers. So it keeps the internet free, encourages e-commerce, and facilitates the signing of contracts and the making of deals. So I think that's one of the best provisions. Not too many provisions directly deal with real estate, but there's a lot of things that indirectly deal with real estate, like the energy provisions. There's now some provisions that facilitate the movement of hydrocarbons and pipelines and streamline the approval of LNG exports that are going to create jobs and are going to create new investment. So I think all of that is very positive. The auto industry was a big focus because it's very integrated. All of the big producers in the US have plants in Mexico. And they put in some tough new rules of origin for automotive, raising it from 62% up as high as 75%, and some labor content that an average of the wages in Mexican on a plant level have to be at least $16 an hour. This is tough for the Mexicans, but may in the long run result in more onshoring of these automotive jobs back into the border, because they may not be able to meet this $16 with their Mexican plants. So all in all, I think it all, when you talk to the White House, the US trade representative, their goal was to get more jobs back in the US, and I think that will happen.
How would that same line of reasoning take us if we say, for example, pharmaceuticals? Where in all of that negotiation did pharmaceutical manufacturing and the ability to move, big pharma, mid pharma around the world and potentially give incentives to land it in the USA and preferably Texas?
Well, there's an intellectual property chapter that enforces and brings to Mexico some of the rules that existed in the US. It extends the term of copyrights and certain issues dealing with pharmaceuticals that I think To be honest, the pharmaceutical industry had a big role in getting those in, and I think it will generally benefit the trade in pharmaceuticals.
Well, that's good news. In South Texas, there's a minor industry of crossing the border to buy your drugs. So in the negotiations, the de minimis pricing before you have to pay taxes, or what you can take in dollar value or pesos across borders and so on. Can you speak to that for a moment?
Yeah, that's one of the kind of more controversial areas. The United States allows up to $800 to come in from Mexico and Canada without paying duty and without formal customs formalities. Mexico, and I'm not sure I have the exact figure, but I think it's more something like $210. So there was a lot of pressure during the negotiations that Mexico should bring their level up to where the US is. I believe Mexico did increase their level, but it's still short of where the US is. Obviously, the FedExes and the UPS would like to see all of these countries have a high level so they wouldn't have to have delays going through customs and pay duties on small packages. So that's sort of some unfinished business where I understand the US is going to continue, and it's the same with Canada. They'd like to see both Canada and Mexico bring their level up to $800 exemption.
Getting in the trucks and heading up IH-35, are the regional value content rules and the labor value content rules substantially changed that will make a difference as to if you've got facilities already in place, why you might consider relocating them or expanding them?
Well, these rules are a lot tougher than they were under NAFTA. The amount of regional value content, and there's also a rule that 70% of the steel and aluminum that goes into any automobile built in the US has to come from North America. So that's going to shift some of the jobs around. Of course, it's all for North America. I think the emphasis was let's try to keep third countries, particularly in Asia, from taking advantage of the USMCA by shipping things into Mexico that then go into a auto assembly to make it harder for that. So to the extent that all of this will have to have more content, it'll be good for US, Mexico, and Canada. I think the labor value content part is definitely going to favor the US because as you know, the minimum wage in Mexico is much lower than $16 an hour. And the rules allow them to count a certain amount, I believe up to 10% of engineering jobs. But many US companies will probably need perhaps to bring back some jobs into the US.
Well, will that be true as well for textiles and their supply chains?
Yeah, the textiles next to auto parts have the second most complex rules of origin. Some of them became stricter. For example, under the USMCA, and this wasn't true under NAFTA, you have to source sewing thread, elastic fabrics, pocketing, coated fabrics, all have to come from North America, where they didn't under NAFTA. At the same time, there is an exemption for kinds of materials such as rayon, visible lining fabric that aren't produced domestically. And they have a de minimis rule, which used to be 7%, now 10%. So up to 10% of a textile can now come from outside of the North American region. So in some ways it's tightened, some ways liberalized. You know, a lot of people in the textile industry on all three countries spent a lot of time working this out. But there's still pretty strict rules.
What about local data storage? As opposed to having to, and the whole concept of data storage is in and of itself, that's an exploding industry.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's a good point. It's covered under the new Digital Service Agreement. There's a provision that no country make as a condition of doing business there that you have to localize your servers and your data storage there. Some countries, developing countries and other parts of the world have laws like this, that you can't have an internet service provider unless you have all your hardware in that country, and then they can tax it and control it. So this was very good that it's a provision now, and it ensures more openness, more freedom for people to do business there.
The discussions about 5G kind of networks and integrating all of, for example, South Texas and Central Texas and new, let's call it broadly internet-related grids. Is that impacted at all?
Well, there's nothing specific on that. I think it would probably develop too close to the end of the negotiations, that took 2 to 3 years to go on. But, this is sort of a living document. There's working groups, particularly technical groups and groups on phytosanitary rules that are still meeting. Some people would like to see a complete sort of reciprocity between FDA and the Mexican authorities there. So once a drug or a food is approved by one, but we're still working on that. That's some issues that will be ongoing.
And 2 recent investment decisions, one Navistar in San Antonio and Tesla outside of Austin, that sort of cyber automated vehicles along with automated trains and automated pipelines and automated ports. On the one hand, you would think you lost some jobs, but on the other hand, it's creating jobs all over the place. Any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of different opinions on that, whether it's creating jobs or just moving jobs. Although my office is in Washington, my firm is headquartered in Detroit, and the people up there are seeing a lot of these automotive jobs coming south. Texas, Georgia, Alabama, now have become major automotive producing states. Part of it is non-union. The laws are different there as far as mandatory union. People like the weather. Texas has no state sales tax. So those are the kind of things that are bringing people to the south, and Texas will be one of the beneficiaries of that. Maybe more so than the other states because you're right on the border.
Are you looking down the road in the next 10 years and with an optimistic set of lenses, or for the Detroits as well as the Dallases, as well as the Dentons, and as well as South Texas?
Well, yeah, I'm optimistic. I might mention too that another real estate issue is the use of foreign trade zones, and I think that there's a increased interest in that. I know I'm involved in something with involving in McAllen, and a lot of people are interested in using the foreign trade zones, free trade zones in connection with cross-border trade. So I'm happy to help people keep up. My email is glick@butzel.com. If you have a question or you want to be involved in something, or you don't know how something is going to affect you, particularly new legislation, I'd be happy to keep you informed. Realtors are usually a very well organized and effective lobbying group in Washington, but there's always different special issues that may be different in Texas, so and maybe more tied in with the USMCA.
Well, yeah, thank you for giving me personally and all of our members and our constituents and clients here in South Texas a lot to think about. We're looking forward to that positive ride over the next 10, 20 years. I think things are going to be great in Texas. We're living demographic destiny. So all we got to do is know the rules, and everyone plays by the rules. And as long as folks like you guide us, I think we'll create more and more closed commercial deals.
Thank you, Charles.
Thank you. I very much appreciate it and look forward to our next conversation.
I'm happy to now welcome Gerald Schwebel. He's IBC Bank's EVP, a leading expert on international trade and finance. Interviewing Gerald will be STCAR board member Hector Romo Jr.
Jerry, thanks again. Let me ask you a couple of questions. We'll start off with this. Could you update us on the Texas Business Advisory Council's recommendations of the Business Task Force that was set up by the Lieutenant Governor and the Governor?
Right.
I assume that was done in March, but does that any of that still moving today, and it could affect the real estate industry?
Well, absolutely. Everything we're doing today is going to affect the real estate industry, seems to be. But first of all, let me thank you all for inviting me to be with you. Yes, let me give you a bit of background. There are two groups that I want to clarify. One is a strike force group that was created by Governor Abbott, that was headed by Mr. Hoffines and a group of individuals appointed by the governor. The second group is Lieutenant Governor Patrick's a task force. And Governor Patrick's task force is called Texas Back to Work Task Force. I was involved in Governor Patrick's task force, and our CEO of our company, Dennis Nixon, was involved directly as part of the Governor Abbott's strike force. In particular for us, our document that was released in April of this year, it was the document that included 17 different committees. There were 13 industry sectors that included construction and real estate. I was directly involved. My area as an advisor was to the supply chain and global trade committee, but we were all privy to participate in the ongoing discussion and dialogue about all sectors. So my comments today may be more related to the cross-border trade and the opportunities for real estate investments, primarily on the Texas side, because that's what I do pretty much every day of my life. So, but we did come up with a series of recommendations. Coincidentally, as we speak today, we're still working on it, and we'll be doing an update because from April to today, there have been some changes, and all we're doing is an update, which we will be submitting to Governor Patrick this weekend, and then Governor Patrick will take that information. And I think as we're getting ready for the next legislative session, I'm sure some of the information will be critical for the Texas legislature to consider.
Well, what do you think is a key takeaway from that you can mention?
Well, most of the dialogue and most of the discussion, of course, because we were working on it back in March and April of this year, focused on, of course, the pandemic scenario that we had. Of course, back then we were looking at, well, this is maybe short-lived, maybe. I think no one would say this thing has gone on for so long.
Okay.
But there were some recommendations that are very critical and relevant to your sector, but it was more in line of how do we, the business sector, continue to stay open as essential industries, or how we can open up should there be a potential sector that was considered non-essential to be closed. And you have seen over the course of the months, sectors open up, sectors shut down, and so different areas have been affected in different ways. So what we see right now, more of a trend by the governor, lieutenant governors to open up Texas, but within the health protocol. So the dialogue and the discussion is how do we cope with the pandemic, and how do we, how does it impact all of those measures on our businesses, ongoing businesses, or even for that matter, even investments.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that, Jerry. Now, IBC has been very active in catering to international border trade over the years. What are you hearing from your Mexican customers on growth due to the USMCA? If we're looking forward,
Well, great question. I've been working on trade issues for decades, and back when you and I had more hair in our heads, and you and I go back a lot of years. And you may remember, Hector, and maybe for everyone that's participating in this call and in this meeting, that we would spend a lot of time spending with companies that may be looking at Mexico as an investment option, manufacturing sectors. And there was a great opportunity back then when we were working in the early years of what was then the North American Free Trade Agreement, the opportunities that may present for Texas in particular, for the United States, for all America, to look at Mexico as a partner, and so that we could actually work together for the benefit of the consumer and become more competitive with the rest of the world. The basic concept. Those years, we were spending time advising U.S. companies or foreign companies that wanted to look at Mexico as an option, because our company, our bank, which was founded in Laredo, Texas, where I-35 begins and ends, we were a natural bank, U.S. bank, Texas-based bank, that had the experience. And so my time back then in the 80s and the 90s, it was 70s, late 70s, 80s, and 90s, was to help companies that were looking at Mexico. Now, ironically, I'm spending more time with some of those investors and companies and families that are looking at investing in the United States. So in Mexico, as you very well know, there's been a change of administration, and the business community is having its challenges, and just like we are. So I see a lot of Mexican investors that have sought a great opportunity in doing business and investing in the United States. And a lot of it has been not only in businesses, but predominantly in real estate investments.
So you see them being interested in increasing their real estate possessions in Texas in general and maybe South Texas?
Absolutely, because right now, as you know, the environment on just short-term investments, the rate environment has been low, but the lowest we've seen in our modern lifetime. So they see real estate as a great opportunity to get a better return on their investment. That's why you're seeing more and more of those investors that have the liquidity to seek real estate investment opportunities here in Texas. And because Texas has so much at stake of dealing with Mexico. Mexico is our #1 trade partner. You tie in the jobs or the companies that invest in Texas and do business, cross-border business. Well, then it's ideal for the families that own those businesses to want to also invest in Texas.
Now, we're aware that the lenders, such as yourselves and other lenders in equity and banking, have had to adapt to a volatile capital market, not only in the United States, but internationally. What sectors do you feel are best poised, you think, to take advantage of the developing opportunities given this volatility? Let's say.
Well, that's always, I get that question asked a lot. Hey, what should I invest in? What are the areas? What should I focus my attention on? And the way I answer that question is that you start off with what do you know what you do? Look at what is your background? Of course, right now you've had and many of them have had to do a major paradigm change. Most of Mexico has been more on the manufacturing side. They assemble or they manufacture. And being in Laredo, Texas, we're so close to cities like Monterrey and Saltillo, which are the manufacturing hubs. But the border, as a result of the Mexican manufacturing industry, used to be known as the maquiladora industry. Also, since the 60s, when they were really set up along the border, that became the focus of manufacturing. So what those companies have had to do as a result of the pandemic, because of the changes, they may have adapted and gone into a different realm of business. And we find a lot of the business for the PPE, the personal protection equipment, that have changed from doing, widgets or shoes. Hey, I can do masks. So there's a lot of that going on right now, as they have their operations, and they were not doing what predominantly was their core business before. They've done a paradigm change to look at where the demand is. That's great they've been flexible and adapting to that. And we're doing that in the United States. The best example is Kodak. in the United States, right? So Mexico is no different. Mexico is doing that, and I think that sector in the medical sector is and equipment and is a major sector. I focus a lot more attention. The other sector that I think all of us have become more aware of the importance of the supply chain and logistics sectors. That is where I see, at the end of the day, everything's got to move from one location to the other, because not everything's produced locally. So if you want to get food, if you want to get a tie, you want to get a shirt, you want to get gasoline, it either is, got on a truck, was on a plane, on a train, and it got there from one place to the other. So the supply chain process, logistics, and that lends itself for, creating hubs for distribution. I think that on the industrial side, I think is an area that has a lot of potential as well.
Sure. I know there's been a lot of e-commerce development in the area. There's automotive. There's the automotive suppliers, a few we know that are coming possibly from Mexico to supply their U.S. counterparts. And I know Laredo, in the last few years, has had tremendous growth on the Laredo side in real estate. It's amazing all the land that has been developed with facilities going up and major players there. And we're seeing that, through the Laredo, San Antonio area, but we're hoping, we'll have that dynamic throughout the area.
Right. Well, you're absolutely correct. Laredo is the leading land port in the country. It's been competing with LA Long Beach back and forth. Who's number one? Who's number two? LA Long Beach has been more impacted by the Far East, the Chinese trade. We're not. Ours is basically more North American, or even even though we do business as a company. We've done business in 40 different countries. International Bank of Commerce. People say, well, I am the I in IBC Bank because that's what our core business has been. Because this also, in years past, we did business all over the world. More in the last 30 years, the focus has been more North American as a region. So yes, I agree with you that in Laredo, as I said earlier, by virtue that we live where the start mile one of Interstate 35 is, and so that's where the supply chain flows. And so you have the international trade infrastructure in place, custom brokers, logistics warehouses, all trade services. This is the hub. And that growth that you have seen with warehousing and distribution centers and ports of entry operations as a result of that growth in trade. And that's why USMCA has been so important to us, and why we've been engaged in the process of making sure that trade does not get disrupted. And you alluded to a very important point. There are areas in the USMCA that were not included under NAFTA, and you alluded to it earlier: e-commerce, digital trade, energy sector, telecommunications, all of those sectors that were included in here. There's even a chapter on competitiveness. There's a chapter on trade facilitation. All of that, if you really look at it, it's to facilitate the flow of legitimate commerce and trade and people. And that's why IBC and our company has been so engaged and has gained the experience that we have right now.
Now, honing in a little bit, Jerry, what are your thoughts about CRE providers, corporate real estate, adding value to commercial and trade industries?
Well, there are options
to support those industries.
Well, definitely that needs to continue, and you got to have it there. You got, people will take risk for a reason. They got a better return of their money, but you got to be engaged. You got to do your homework. You got to be involved. If I had $1 for everybody to tell me that that they know Mexico, they understand Mexico, for example, or they know Texas. But their idea of being in Texas, they've been to Dallas, but the idea of being, by the way, that's that trade that's flowing, that horn you may be hearing coming out of my office. We have the Kansas City rail line
Yes.
that train runs by my office, 10 times a day. And that is commerce. That is grain, commodities going into Mexico that may turn into, tortillas, or may turn into bread, etc. So, or it may be, a petroleum-based product that's going in for plastic injection plants. So I always want to,
Yes, I remember that. I've been there, seen that.
But going back to your original question, is that it's important that people understand, the investor understands what is going on in the region that they're seeking, and that they weigh in on all the options of what's available. Or it's a bank, or maybe as an investor for a real estate investment trust, other forms of funds that may be looking, and that they understand clearly that they add value to the region, and then they get a better return of their investment, of course, right?
So you're open.
Oh yeah,
you're open.
We predominantly. Yes. We basically are a real estate commercial bank. By virtue, as I said, by being on the border, we have the experience up and down the border, up the I-35 corridor, Houston, Oklahoma. So, commercial real estate is our bread and butter from the lending side. So, because as I said, the logistics and distribution supply chain, that extends to everybody. No one's, whether it's, like I said, food or any product, it's just natural that as we see the flow of trade, what are the products, what are the companies, what are the investments that allude to that, whether it's Tesla moving, let's say, to Austin and the automotive sector, as you said, or it's perishables. We just in Laredo will be housing the largest avocado distributor in the country, and or right now, and that's we've diversified away in Laredo, trying to diversify away from the automotive sector, even though it's a predominantly major port of the products that cross through here, to fresh produce and perishables, kind of like as an option to the Rio Grande Valley. And we need to diversify even more into other sectors. I believe in biomed and the technology side that accommodates that digital trade.
Excellent point, Jerry. Well, thank you so much, and we'll see you soon.
Hope to. Good luck, everyone.
Our last presenter today is Keith Patridge, President, CEO of the McAllen Economic Development Corporation and McAllen's Foreign Trade Zone. Interviewing Keith will be STCAR past president Randy Summers.
Good morning, Keith.
Good morning, Randy. Pleasure to be with you this morning.
Well, it's a pleasure to, to have you with us this morning as well. And we know how important South Texas is to actually the rest of the United States, as well as Canada, with everything that travels through South Texas from Mexico on its way up north. And so as we talk a little bit this morning, I'd like to see what do you feel the top industries in Texas are that will benefit from USMCA?
Without question, Randy, all types of manufacturing are going to benefit with a focus on automotive, steel and aluminum, but plus medical devices, PPE, pharma, and electronic components that not necessarily because of the USMCA, but really because of COVID-19 and the problems that it has brought to light with the sourcing of critical materials from foreign countries. Also, the market for agricultural products will continue to grow for Texas.
One of the biggest changes involves the automotive industries. And what are some of those changes, and how will automotive manufacturing plants in Texas benefit?
Well, NAFTA was 25 years old before it was replaced, and its rules were really outdated. A lot of things in technology had changed that didn't exist when NAFTA was created. Things like cell phones, things like laptop computers, really wasn't thought about when when NAFTA was created. And so it contained a lot of provisions that, quite frankly, allowed companies to free ride, and in many cases actually discouraged automotive manufacturing and investment in the US. Some of the more important areas of NAFTA that we see as very important to us is the USMCA increased the regional value content from 62.5% for automobiles to 75% over the next 3 years. Now, what that means is that instead of 62.5% of the product value must be coming from one of the three countries, that's now increased to 75%, which is pretty significant increase, and from a manufacturing standpoint makes it very difficult to manufacture somewhere else and still qualify projects or products for the automotive sector. And this has actually resulted in a heightening of interest from foreign automotive suppliers to establish operations in North America.
The crossing of goods into the United States as well as into Mexico, USMCA requires the establishing of a uniform system for cross-border movement of the goods. Is this going to expedite the cross-border movement of those goods, and how different are those requirements than what was originally in place?
I think so. One of the goals of USMCA was really to make the movement of goods between the partner countries, US, Canada, and Mexico, I think simpler, not as much paperwork, and they've tried to do that. I'm not sure they've accomplished it, but they've tried, and more uniform. Historically, and you've been in the Valley all your life, and so you're aware of what I'm saying, but historically the process was often applied differently between different ports of entry, particularly on the Mexico side, where you had the interpretation of regulations or laws or the process of crossing was totally different between ports of entry, which made it very confusing for companies, particularly the small importer and exporter, to figure out how to ship product back and forth across the border. The USMCA's tried to improve that process, but however, having said that, in my opinion, really what is speeding up the cross-border shipments today is more of what CBP has been doing to streamline the process with a unified customs clearance program that they're implementing across the border, the CTPAT, FAST, and other trusted shipper programs, and now new technology that's being installed at the ports of entry that improve the inspection process so that you don't have the unloading of trucks. They're actually able to see everything that's in there without disrupting the shipments, and it makes it much faster. So I think that USMCA, while I think it's made it possible, I think the most of the improvement has actually come because of technology and applications of that technology by CBP.
So all of this is going to really change, and we kind of alluded to it earlier, the affect the industrial warehousing needs are going to that are going to be required in South Texas. What do you see in that growth and for warehousing needs, as well as this also includes a lot of agriculture and cold storage needs that are going to be needed?
Randy, I think that's probably one of the biggest things that if your listeners or your membership takes anything away, we are desperate for industrial space, at least in the McAllen area, the MSA. We have a huge demand for it. As a matter of fact, we're already seeing the results of USMCA, as I mentioned earlier, that is driving a lot of that. Mentioned we are currently working with between, well, it's actually 27 companies right now. If we were to get all of those companies, that's about 2.8 million square feet of space that we will need. That's not even included in the numbers I'm talking about now. But when you look at the second quarter of 2020 CBRE McAllen MSA Industrial Report, which came out a few weeks ago, right now in the McAllen MSA, we have a 2.3 industrial building vacancy. 2.3%. That's almost unheard of.
Exactly.
We don't have anything. But when you look at that vacancy rate and then look at the user demand that was identified by CBRE of 1.6 million square feet, you can see where we're at. This is actually 460,000 square feet more. The demand is 460,000 square feet more than the total available space in the market. So we're already in a deficit of 460,000 square feet with the companies identified by CBRE, and we have another 27 companies that is looking at another 2.8 million square feet. So we need buildings desperately. And as far as the second part of your question on cold storage, of course, as you are aware, the Hidalgo, Pharr, Anzalduas port of entry is the #1 port of entry for fresh fruits and vegetables. And because of the new highway from the west coast of Mexico and the continued growth of agriculture in Mexico, coupled with the increasing market demand in the US, we're seeing a steady increase in the demand for US cold storage. And in addition to the conversion of existing dry warehousing to cold storage, which we're seeing quite a bit of that, or cooler space, and the new construction, we are working with companies that either want to do a build-to-suit or lease space in the amount of over 500,000 square feet just in cold storage requirements. So we have an opportunity here for your membership to start looking at this area, particularly in the industrial area. We need it desperately. And what's important with that is that almost all of our sites are located in opportunity zones. So what that means is, of course, if they have clients that have problems or the issues with a capital gains tax, that's a great opportunity to help them out.
Sounds like great opportunities for developers as realtors, and great job opportunities that are going to be coming up with all that development. That's very exciting. How can our industry continue to assist the EDCs and South Texas in the commercial real estate?
The realtors are key support of our efforts to bring jobs and investment to our area, just as they are everywhere. But the biggest thing that the commercial real estate could do for us is to help us bring investment to the community to build new buildings. As you know, we have literally thousands of acres of Class A industrial sites available, and most of them are located in, as I mentioned, opportunity zones. But one of the things that we really need to help, and I think this is statewide, is we really need the help of the realtors in helping to paint a more accurate picture of the opportunities that exist in South Texas. You brought it up, you alluded to it just a couple of minutes ago. For the last 14 years, we've been dealing with the constant challenges caused by the Mexico drug wars. But yet we've continuously been ranked as one of the safest areas in the United States with the FBI crime stats. And at the same time, South Texas has been identified in the national media as ground zero on many political hot button issues involving immigration, trade, the border wall, and most recently, we're getting impacted nationally by Hurricane Hannah, the results of Hurricane Hannah, and now COVID-19. We're the hot spot. And it has impacted that over the last 14 years is impacting the visual that our area has to people that are not familiar with us. And it's in it, and we're seen as a negative light. We get a lot of companies that come in that say, well, is it safe there? Well, tell me about this. And it all is relating to things that they've seen on the 24-hour news cycle. So, and we're not asking anybody to say things that aren't true. We just want to have an accurate picture presented of what Texas and South Texas has to offer companies and investments. And so that's one of the big things.
I agree with you 100%, Keith. And I think that the Valley is, the Rio Grande Valley and South Texas is just a hotbed of opportunity. And I'm excited to be a part of it and being able to work in the communities as well as work in the Valley. And I know that you are too. Keith, we want to thank you for your insights that you've provided for us on South Texas and the USMCA, and just want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule, and we look forward to helping you in any way that we can in the future. Thanks for being with us, Keith.
Thank you very much, Randy, and congratulations to all your membership, and I wish them the best.
Thank you for joining us today. I hope you've had gained some great insights. We have an upcoming S7-hour CE class on 1031 exchanges with YU Lamb on October 26. To learn more about this class and STCAR, please visit stcar.org. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of this conference and have a great day.